What's up, everybody? Thank you all very much for tuning in to the Warlock patch 9.0.5 update to Covenants. We're going to be bringing into this video Destruction, Affliction, and Demonology Warlocks all in one video, so you're not going to have to look for separate videos in regards to Covenants. We will be covering which Covenants are the best for each spec. We'll be covering all four for each spec, and they will be in their different sections throughout this video. We've released Covenant videos or Covenant guides for Warlocks for the pre-patch of Shadowlands. We've also done one for the first patch, which was 9.0.2. We're here to go ahead and update with 9.0.5 recently because there was a couple of updates, but not too much is changing. However, I just felt that I needed to go ahead and update this video just because there was a couple of things missing from the first one anyways. Even though there was nothing wrong with the first one, I just want to go ahead and say, for those of you that have been checking out our Warlock guides lately, thank you all very much for the support. Thank you all very much for the feedback. I've noticed a couple of things that weren't so great in the feedback from people that weren't really watching the whole videos. But nonetheless, overall, for those of you that have watched the full video and understand the purpose of my standard Demonology, Affliction, and Destruction Warlock guides that were recently released, thank you all very much for the support on that. Those guides were basically for new players to cover the basic standards on those each and given specs in each separate video, not to go into deep details on Covenants, Soulbinds, Legendaries, Conduits. Those will be in different videos. For example, today we're going over Covenants. It was not to go into deep details on rotations, into like potions, when to use trinkets, all that type of stuff. It was basically to give you the standard layout of those of the rotation, utilizing nothing but the class abilities. For example, in Demonology, I went into deep details of 3 specs. The traditional spec, which most people do play. There was a new Dreadstalker build that is kind of viable now, and of course my Nether Portal build. People were bashing me for saying, no, Nether Portal, do never play it. I mean, if you don't want to play it, don't play it. I'm just giving you guys viable builds. Yes, it is a viable build. If you can't play it, don't play it. Don't hate on it. But nonetheless, let's get into the Covenants. And we're going to go ahead and start off with a little bit of an introductory on what are Covenants, because some of you might actually just be coming back to World of Warcraft in patch 9.0.5, and you might not even know what's going on. So, Covenants are a core choice at the start of your journey in the Shadowlands and will have you decide where your allegiance lies. Would you rather support the Kirian of Bastion, the Necroloids of Maldraxxus, the Night Fae of Ardenweald, or the Venthyr of Ravendreth? Basically, choosing a Covenant is the most important decision your character can actually make in Shadowlands. It's not really, but it's one of. And as the Covenant abilities and the Soulbinds and the Conduits and all that type of stuff, it'll significantly impact your specs, gameplay, and performances just a tad. So through this choice, your rotation kind of changes. Certain bonuses will appear in dungeons for your entire group. For example, if you're a Necroloid in Theater of Pain, there's flags that you can click that'll buff up the group for a couple of minutes. Things like that. So if your Covenant lies, let's say, in Kirian for the Bastion, a couple of those dungeons in Bastion, Kirians have abilities to go ahead and utilize within those dungeons that'll help your group. For example, like I've already stated, the Necroloids and Maldraxxus, you have abilities that you can enhance your group's gameplay in like Theater of Pain. Again, there's Soulbinds and Conduits, which we'll be getting into in another video, so on and so forth. And you're basically able to follow the storyline of different paths in each Covenant as well. You get a little bit more in-depth once you've selected a Covenant. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and go over each Covenant's abilities. We're going to be going over individually for Destruction, Demonology, and Affliction as well after that. And let's go ahead and start off with the Kirian of Bastion. You're going to be given a signature ability as well as a Warlock specific ability for each and every Covenant. So there's going to be 4 total signature abilities and 4 total Warlock abilities. The Warlock abilities change with each and every Covenant. When it comes to the signature abilities, they're basically universal to all classes. So for example, like I said, starting off with the Kirian signature ability, you got something that's called Summon Steward, which calls your steward to bring you basically Phials of Serenity. These Phials of Serenity restore 20% health and remove all disease, poisons, curses, and bleed effects on you. You also have the Warlock ability called Scurrying Tith, which deals damage to enemies as well as generates soul shards. For the Night Fae, We have a signature ability of Soul Shape. It basically transforms you into a Vulpin. There's other Soul Shape forms that you can get through questing purposes and other means through the Night Fae Covenant, instantly teleporting you forward and increasing your movement speed for a short time. You also have the Warlock ability called Soul Rot, which withers away life force from your current and 3 nearby targets, which is technically just an AoE multi-target dot ability. Next up, we also have the Necroloid, a signature ability called Fleshcraft, which is basically a defensive cooldown or a defensive bubble, which provides an absorption shield equal to 20 to 50% of your maximum health. And the reason why there's a gap from 20 to 50, you're basically absorbing the life force of recent enemies that you've killed. So the more that there is there, or the stronger that the enemies are that are there laying dead, you'll get a bigger shield. You also have a Warlock ability called Decimating Bolt, which deals damage and empowers your next 3 Drain Souls, Demon Bolts, and Incinerates. When it comes to the Venthyr, you have a signature ability of Door of Shadows, which teleports you to a targeted location, similar to the Reaper ability in Overwatch. And you also have a Warlock ability called Impending Catastrophe. This is also another multi-target AoE ability, which creates a cloud that travels to the target and afflicts them with Curse of Weakness and Curse of Tongues while dealing damage. There are also tons of other things that you can get in Covenants, such as transmog items, pets, mounts, so on and so forth. But we're not going to be getting into collectibles. We're going to be mainly focusing on which Covenants are best for each spec, which is what we're going to be getting into now, starting off with the Demonology Warlock. So now to recap and basically go into which of the 4 Covenants in order are the best for Demonology Warlocks. And this is covering Mythic Plus content, covering raiding, PvP, so on and so forth. Pretty much at number 1, you're going to have the Necroloid Covenant. At number 2, you're going to have the Night Fae. At number 3, you're going to have the Kirian. And at number 4, you're going to have the Venthyr. To go a little bit more into deep details on that, we're going to start off from the bottom and make our way back up to Necroloids. So starting off with the Venthyr. Impending Catastrophe is an interesting ability to have in your toolkit, most especially again for Mythic Plus content, where the smart cursing could prove to be very beneficial, reducing incoming damage from melee mobs for the tank while making interrupts easier to do or have more relaxed restrictions on the range. While this serves a similar purpose in raids, you run the risk of overriding the curse you are manually putting up if the smart curse functions decides to it should curse something different. This spell is vastly undertuned. It does like no damage at all. It's kind of just dead, and it's nearly not worth casting, to be honest, at all, which is why I throw the Venthyr at the bottom for pretty much any aspect of the game that you're playing. When it comes to the Kirian, and due to raid design, and the fact that some abilities naturally play towards the strength of the cleansing effect provided by the Summon Steward, that kind of is pretty useful, and there could be some use for the shared ability of Kirian. However, with the recent changes, due to the cleansing effect not working on many abilities in Castle Nathria, it kind of loses most of its previous appeal. So it's kind of just dead. It doesn't even work. So it was cool if it worked as intended, but I mean, I guess it's working as intended now. They didn't want it to work. So hey, Blizzard Entertainment, they decided to take the fun out of the game. But then Scaring Tith does offer a full Soul Shards refresh that you can gain on mobs that are near death. While not that relevant in raids, it should have plenty of use in Mythic Plus, where you're rolling your Soul Shards from pack to pack, which is very, very cool, because again, there's lots of mobs to be able to roll that on and get the full Soul Shard benefit. But when you're fighting a raid boss, not really that much, because you can't die multiple times. Once he's dead, he's dead. So the most appealing thing about the Kirian is that you'll have access to Pelagos, which is a soulbind, which I'll be getting into in another video, just to give you a heads up. But the abilities themselves from the Kirian are kind of dead. Next up, the Night Fae. When looking at the Night Fae as a whole, the biggest takeaway is the ability Soul Shape. This is again, I've said this already, it is probably the best freaking main ability that you can get from a Covenant, which allows you to have incredible amounts of movements. Again, this helps so much in PvP. You got freaking melee warriors smacking your face. It helps so much in PvE. Mythic Plus, of course, you got to get from point A to the finish as quickly as you possibly can, and also in raiding, you might be standing in fire. Get the hell out. Let's blink away, fam. Then you got Soul Rot. It does offer some incentives in Mythic Plus, and the damage on single target is not completely bottom tiers. It's not really the worst. There are also some Soulbind abilities that benefit from Demonology nicely. In particular, again, Dreamweaver's Field of Blossoms, but again, I'll go into deep details on that on a Soulbind video. Overall, this is one of the stronger covenants for Demonology, and you'll find most players playing Night Fae in most situations as the Demonology Warlock. However, at number 1, I have the Necroloids. The Necroloid ability, Decimating Bolt, allows you to buff the damage of your Demon Bolt, which increases in power the lower the health of the mob it hits. This is particularly powerful in raiding, when the typical execute phase requires you to amp up damage, and there are multitudes of talents, conduits, and legendaries that further buff Demon Bolt, which makes the Necroloid ability quite interesting and very fun to play with. And Fleshcraft can also provide you with an additional shielding, which I typically have in mass thanks to Soul Leech. It is definitely not the most useful ability, considering Soul Shape, Soul Shape I think. Yeah, it's called Soul Shape from the Night Fae, but it should be decent as an extra little absorb bubble that you can get from the Necroloids. But that Decimating Bolt ability is definitely the best main Covenant ability that you can get from the 4 Covenants. But again, when it comes to Necroloids and Night Fae, they're very, very neck and neck. However, Necroloids are, in my opinion, top tier over Night Fae, bringing into 3rd Kirian and bringing into 4th Venthyr. Alright, now getting into the thick of things. Which Covenant is best for Destruction Warlock? Very similar to Demonology, how Necroloids and Night Fae were kind of neck and neck into top tier, with Kirian and Venthyr kind of being bottom tier. When it comes to a Destruction Warlock, I prefer Night Fae over Necrolord. However, they're both very good and strong for Destruction Warlocks, to where if whatever one you see fit. Kirian also is the best for Mythic Plus content. Now, it is good in Mythic Plus content for Demonology Warlocks as well. However, Destruction Warlocks and Affliction Warlocks, Kirian is just top tier in Mythic Plus content, while Venthyr is just stupid and dead. So, to get into the analysis on why. So again, we're going to go with Night Fae at number 1, Necrolord at number 2, Kirian at number 3, and Venthyr at number 4. We're going to go back in that order, 4, 3, 2, and 1, ending off with the Night Fae. So let's get into the analysis on why. So, for the Venthyr, that class ability of impending catastrophe, it is interesting and can apply Curse of Tongues and Weakness, but the damage is just not good. The damage is just not there, and it just doesn't compare favorably to the other Covenant's abilities. Like, yes, it's applying Curse of Tongues and Weaknesses, which is great in like probably Mythic Plus content, but again, the damage isn't worth it, and it's just not worth it to be applying that. And when it comes to the Door of Shadows ability, yes, it's a nice mobility, but you can get a better mobility ability from Night Fae, and Door of Shadows just isn't really great. So, we're going to clearly keep that at the bottom of the ranking, bottom of the tier. When it comes to the Kirian class ability of Scurrying Tith, this is the best for Mythic Plus content. However, I do have this as the 3rd best overall Covenant for the Destruction Warlocks. It is the strongest Covenant due to the combination of the spell of Scurrying Tith. The ability is very strong, especially for Destruction. The spell is duplicated by Havoc. You're able to generate 5 soul shards with the target dying, so on and so forth. It's a strong ability, and it's great for fast-paced combat, which is basically Mythic Plus content. However, it is not the strongest for raiding, and it is not the strongest for PvP. It also has a Covenant ability of Summon Steward, which is kind of cool. And, of course, let's get into the Necrolord Decimating Bolt. This ability is your strongest single target ability for Destruction Warlock, and especially during execute phases for your Incinerate stacks. This is also going to go ahead and help you with your Chaos Bolt damage as well. It's an absolute massive, super strong ability, and it is very, very useful for the Destruction Warlocks. Again, you also have the Covenant ability of Fleshcraft, which is basically just a defensive bubble or defensive cooldown that you can use, and I love it. I'm Necrolord when it comes to my Demonology Warlock, because I main Demonology, but I'm going to strongly suggest Night Fae over Necrolord, even though they're both pretty much neck and neck when it comes to damage. You will find Night Fae Warlocks a little bit more than Necrolord Warlocks when it comes to destruction. However, Either or is worth it. Night Fae's class ability of Soul Rot is made a lot more attractive, again, by having the health cast remove and the damage on the main targeted buffed. So the damage is a lot better. It is sadly capped at 4 targets, and you're probably not going to utilize the Drain Life portion unless you're in PvP. But if you are in PvP, that's just a much more attractive ability then, because you will probably utilize the Drain Life as a defensive ability. Overall, it adds a lot of value when it comes to damage, especially. It's a little bit more universal. Being said, you can use the Night Fae Covenant abilities in Mythics, PvP, and as well as raiding. When the Necroloids are just mainly strong for PvP as well as raiding. If you are Necroloid, you would not. It's still good, still strong in Mythic Plus content. However, the Kirian ability definitely outbeats the Necroloid ability when it comes to Mythic Plus content. However, when it comes to Night Fae, it's kind of universal with all 3 basically main aspects of the game. So again, Night Fae at number 1, Necroloid at number 2, Kirian at number 3, and Venthyr at number 4. Now to recap the best covenants for an Affliction Warlock. At number 1, I have Night Fae. At number 2, Kirian. At number 3, Necroloid. And number 4, Venthyr. As you guys know, I love Necroloid, but no, not for Affliction Warlocks. It is actually almost as bad as Venthyr. However, Night Fae is, to me, my favorite one to do, as well as Kirian being a strong number 2. Getting into the analysis and the recap. So, again, we have Night Fae at number 1, Kirian at number 2, Necroloid at 3, and Venthyr at 4. So we're going to start off with the Venthyr, go to Necroloid, Kirian, and then Night Fae. Venthyr is an interesting option. I can guarantee you if Soul Shape didn't exist, I'd say the Door of Shadows ability would be cool. But again, Door of Shadows just doesn't go far, and Soul Shape is like a million times better. So yeah, it's just dead. That the Soul Shape ability already beats Door of Shadows, and unfortunately, the Venthyr and wannabe vampires alike, the Impending Catastrophe ability is just so bad. Yeah, cool. It applies smart curses, but not many that situations where you're gonna want that. It's an attractive option for just basically pure Mythic Plus players, but again, if you're not playing Night Fae, you're kind of doing it wrong. If you're going for a multi-target AoE ability, and again, the Night Fae also has a dot, so Venthyr is just not really useful at all. Next up is the Necroloids. Early in the beta, Decimating Bolt was absolutely stupidly OP. It's kind of got nerfed at the beginning of Shadowlands, and it's just kind of just useless now for Affliction Warlocks. Decimating Bolt is the strongest single target ability, but it doesn't really benefit Affliction Warlocks as much as the abilities from the Kirian and the Night Fae do. Again, Decimating Bolt isn't a dot. Kirian and Night Fae have a dot, and Decimating Bolt only buffs your next 1 Drain Soul, which should be your talented ability as an Affliction Warlocks. And Fleshcraft is cool. But it's not as strong as Soul Shape. But again, it is a cool and unique ability as a defensive cooldown and a defensive bubble. So I'm not going to hate on Fleshcraft. But Decimating Bolt is not strong for Affliction Warlocks. We've also got Kirian, which is probably the best of the two, comparing it to Night Fae for Mythic Plus content. Mythic Plus content with the Kirian is the better because it's more fast paced. It's a lot more useful. First and foremost, they have one of the strongest soul binds in the game with the Kirian. So I'm not going to get into the details on that just yet, but it's super duper strong. And when it comes to the Kirian's main class ability, it's absolutely strong for whatchamacallit. It's very strong for Mythic Plus content because it's, again, fast-paced fighting, fast-paced combat. Getting the amount of soul shards that you can go ahead and juggle with is very, very nice. Being able to dump your soul shards into Malefic Rapture, it's just a ton of pure damage choices for Affliction Warlocks that can come from Kirian. But when it comes to the Night Fae, I strongly suggest Night Fae, especially for PvP combat, but of course also in raiding. It's by far the strongest picks for the Affliction Warlock. Basically, Soul Rot being utilized as a dot, Soul Shape being an absolute banger of a movement ability. Also, all 3 Soulbind trees are also pretty strong as well. But again, we'll get into that in a different video. So I strongly suggest Night Fae as the best Covenant for an Affliction Warlock. So for those of you that tuned in, I hope this in-depth guide for Covenants for Warlocks in all 3 specs helped you in some way, shape, or form choose a specific Covenant for your given spec as a Warlock. I tried to go into the detail as much as possible. Stay tuned. We will be releasing guides for Soulbinds, which I kind of like dipped into in this video. We'll be releasing a guide for Conduits, and we'll be releasing a guide for Legendary Powers as well. Those 3 videos will be very similar to this, how all 3 specs will be into one video. I will include timestamps as well, which you probably already realized, so yay. Leave a thumbs up, share the video, comment down below if you have any questions or concerns, and stay tuned for some more. Peace out, everybody, and have a wonderful day.